Well, I think the way I see it is, I think there's really one party that is active in California and Santa Barbara. The Republican Party, well, there's a name, there's a lot of Republicans. I don't think that they really are a player. In Santa Barbara, they hide. So it's really hard to see who's the leaders and, how would you recruit when you're.
Welcome to Santa Barbara Talks with Josh Molina. Today's going to be a really fun, different interview. It's my pleasure today to be here with Justin Shores, who is somebody who I'm familiar with through his advocacy at the Santa Barbara Unified School District Board of Trustee meetings and as a parent, and talking about so many of the issues that are important to parents and families in the school district. And a growing, increasingly powerful sort of a player in conservative politics. So, Justin Shores, how are you doing today?
Very good. Thanks, Josh. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, no, thank you. It's my pleasure. Let's dive right in, Justin. You are somebody who has been involved. Everyone knows who you are through your advocacy, and I know you've cared a whole lot about vaccine mandates and masking, and you've talked about that. And so some people may be familiar with you through your activism in that regard. But where I want to start is to talk to you about conservative politics. You are somebody who's got your finger on the pulse. You're a player. You talk to so many of the candidates who are running. Let's just dive right in. What is going on with conservative Republican politics in this county? And the big question is, how do conservatives grow their power in a county where they're outnumbered registration wise?
Well, I think the way I see it is, I think there's really one party that is active in California and Santa Barbara. The Republican Party, well, there's a name, there's a lot of Republicans. I don't think that they really are a player. In Santa Barbara, they hide. So it's really hard to see who's the leaders and, how would you recruit when you're hiding. So I think that conservative politics have kind of morphed into a bunch of different groups fighting for the similar causes. There's a lot of parent groups. I mean, obviously the Republican Party is still around, but I don't see a lot of leadership from it. They seem really hidden. So most of the people that are active right now are the parent groups and people that are just, not Democrats. I mean, my group is full of, ex-Democrats and independents and Green Party and just people that aren't aligned with the state government, essentially. So I put it a little bit different category. I don't see us as Republicans and Democrats in Santa Barbara. In Santa Barbara, I see us as, there's people that are in the political realm that have been doing it for a long time, that have been successful staying in charge. There's a lot of people on the outside that get filtered out by the parties. The parties kind of stop them from getting further in their political aspirations if they haven't chosen one side. So I really feel like the focus should be local in Santa Barbara, and we should stop putting ourselves into boxes if we really want to become a community and grow politically in any way. I wanted to put people in office that have merit and that have the ability to do their job and to be effective at their job. So I think that goes beyond partisan politics. So where are the conservatives? They're all working, but they're a little bit scattered in a way. I do see a lot more unity coming. I think the unity is around the school districts, but that I think both parties are focusing on. They're focusing on school districts and school board members. Both parties have put big emphasis on that. So if you're thinking where the parties are pushing people, I do think it's towards the school boards.
So
yeah.
you mentioned Justin, your group. So let's talk about who is your group. I think we had this conversation offline. I don't believe you're a registered Republican. You are conservative. You have been a Republican in the past. There's a lot of different types of people who watch this, and some of the people watching this show are going to be initially skeptical. Some people are going to be really excited to hear your voice. What is your group, and who do you represent?
Well, essentially, I'm trying to represent issues, not essentially a political party. StandUp Santa Barbara is a PAC that I helped create that focuses on medical freedom, excellence in education, and environmental stewardship. So our platform is not radical; it's very moderate, especially for Santa Barbara. We were founded on medical freedom over the last 30 years with Walter Capps and that legacy of choice. The environmental aspect of it would be something that I think could bridge the gap between conservatives and liberals, because we all want to do better locally. We all want to have cleaner water and air and better energy sources and more sustainable energy and food production. I would love to have that all come from Goleta and Santa Barbara, so we're not having to look outside when we need it. If we had our own local solutions for that stuff, I think it's the future, and it's how we can pull out of some of these hard statewide issues that we're seeing if we focus on a local sustainability. So I think that platform, and then excellence in education, is very broad. I think that's kind of one of the most broad platform pieces I have. But my goal is to improve our education system. We're spending $23,000 per student in California, and we're 50th in literacy. And those numbers are coming out of Santa Barbara too. We have some really poor scores and outcomes. So right now, the people in charge, either need to change some policy, or there needs to be new people. We need new management. We need new. We're being really mismanaged in the state, and unfortunately, when it breaks down to it, the Democrats are in charge in California. They're in charge in Santa Barbara. That's the one party that is active in California that is effective. So I think the focus should be local. We do need to focus on the school boards. I'm jumping on conservative candidates, but I also have Democrat candidates. I have people that hate Trump that I'm working with that would be, good people in office. That's what I'm looking for. I want people that have merit, that have a resume, that have a good plan, and that are not going to go in and just be, the representative of the board. They should be representing people, not just themselves and their own decisions. And that's why I really got active, was seeing boards ignore thousands of people and just choose their own agenda. And that was what was Santa Barbara Unified with the Teen Talk curriculum. And there was so much outrage on that. And I know there's one or two people behind the scenes that made it go the way it went just because of money. It was all about the who was getting paid for that curriculum. So it's, that is what radicalized me as an activist, watching that board just ignore so much public input and not even acknowledge it, not even compromise in any way. I mean, it was just our way or no way. So I think that's what needs to stop. People are not really aware of what's going on at these boards. There's a lot of perception politics where, it's all about patting each other on the back and not telling the people when they make mistakes and not owning up to them. And that perception politics is what's hurting our schools. I mean, we're hurting our government. We can't worry as much about perception as we should be worrying about outcomes and where these decisions are taking us.
Let's get to education in a second, but let's talk about the election. So we have the November 8th election, and obviously we have school board races in Santa Barbara and Goleta that are high profile. Okay, So we have an open seat on the Santa Barbara Unified School District Board of Education with Kate Ford stepping down. And so we've got, I think, two registered Democrats in that race. And we have a third candidate who I don't know what she is.
Yeah, Effie is actually, she's a registered Republican, but I would not, I mean, she has a flip phone. She's, she's a hardworking education specialist. I mean, she knows everything in and out about Santa Barbara Unified. I mean, she is probably the best candidate for that job when it comes to who's the most prepared. She is a Latina. She knows Spanish and she knows dialects of Spanish. She knows the deep, how important it is for students not to be put in just a box of ESL. She knows that it should be individually positioned. These kids, some of them are coming in from Peru or even Mexico City, where there's totally different dialects, and they're put into a Spanish class and having to learn that type of Spanish again, and then learn English. So they're having to learn 3 languages before they can start to really learn. She really understands that. She also has been a public servant for us. I mean, the lady has so much merit and really needs, I hope you can have her on your show, because she's a wonderful person. And
so you mentioned Effie Bañales, is that her
yes,
name? Okay.
Yes, Effie Bañales.
And this is one of the things that comes up, is that you have Gabe Escobedo, who's in the race, who's endorsed by the Democratic Party, Planning Commission, Community Formation Commission, activist, so we know who he is. We have Dan LaBarge, who's we know who he is. He's got a nonprofit that's known in the community. But there's a third person in the race, and I imagine these are the kind of things, and I know I get it as a journalist, like we write about these people who, certain people get attention, and then there's these other candidates who don't get as much attention. And I know that a lot of times conservatives can feel as though that's media bias, that, oh, you're only focusing on these people, you're not focusing on those. So I can imagine that could be a frustrating sort of perspective. There's reasons why some candidates get coverage and others don't. It doesn't really have to do with media bias, but more about the actual campaign. But we have Santa Barbara Unified, so that's a seat. What's at stake in that contest? You have Kate Ford stepping down.
Much.
What's at stake from your perspective?
Well, honestly, I think this will surprise a lot of people, but I'm really bummed that Kate Ford is leaving. I totally disagree with her on the COVID policies, but she was the best board member in my mind for Santa Barbara Unified. She really knew education. So I'm sorry to see her go. And in fact, I didn't want to run anyone against her. So I was like, she's too strong, and she's a good person on that board, even though I totally disagree with her on one of my core principles. Santa Barbara Unified is imploding pretty much. I mean, with so many administrators leaving, the teachers aren't happy. Whoever gets on that board needs to be ready to work hard for that board. And I think Gabe's a nice guy. I've seen a few things of him. I just hope it's not somebody going in to just have a political stepping stone, because those kids it is not fair to that school to have somebody just appointed to that seat that is the political nepotism is not okay for this situation. So I really hope voters will look at the 3 candidates and give them all a shot, because there's definitely good parts to each of those candidates. I think Dan's got some strength too. I think Dan it's kind of interesting because he's getting some more talk. He's getting more support. One of the board members mentioned him the other day at a meeting and mentioned how, his merits. So in a way, a soft endorsement of him. So it's kind of interesting that he's coming up as a player in this race too. So, but he's not choosing a party. So as well as I do, there's 2 parties. If you don't side with one, how are you going to get turnout? How are you going to get people to vote? So I think he hurts Gabe more than he hurts Effie. I think if Effie works hard and she does a campaign, which I haven't seen a lot of yet, I've worked with her a little bit, but if her campaign actually gets running and she gets some messaging out, she actually has a shot at possibly just stealing the conservative votes and Gabe and Dan splitting the vote. I mean, that's a potential win for conservatives and a win for Santa Barbara County, to be honest.
Goleta, we got Christy Lozano running for
Right.
Goleta School Board, and she's running against Emily Zacharias. There may be another candidate in there, but again, it's going to be between those two, most likely, who's going to win that seat. And so what's your take on that? Christy Lozano, obviously great name recognition. Like, a lot of people know who she is. And I've said on Jerry's show that, she's got super high highs and super low lows. You say her name and people are like, just ferocious negativity. And then there's others who are like, she's a really good person. And so it's very, split, but she's running for the seat and she's got name recognition in this small little Goleta district. So can she win? Do you see her being as viable here to win this seat?
Her district is pretty heavy Democrat. So if you look at the demographics on paper, it's a tough win for a Republican. So I think it comes down to turnout. And Bert Haley is the third candidate, and his signs are popping up. I don't know how good of a campaign he'll do, but who will he take votes from? Will it be from Christie or will it be from Emily? Emily is the Democrat endorsed, right? She was endorsed at on Monday at the Labor Day thing. So it's going to be, somewhat of a Republican versus Democrat fight, but we'll see. I love Christy. She's a great person, and I think there is a lot of prejudice for her because of how she came out. She did come out with some hard hits against the school, and she's somewhat of a divisive, when it comes down to in-your-face candidate, because she's calling out the stuff that she sees, and I think she's gotten her name because of that, because she's taking a stand. And I see Christie as the future of the Republican Party. If they want some leaders, because we need leaders for one, we don't have them. Where do you look around Santa Barbara and see a Republican leader anymore? Now that we've gone into this era, right? We don't have the Dale Francisco or the Firestones or anything like that name recognition in Santa Barbara. Christie can take the baton and she can run with it, and she is capable of it. Mm-hmm. I do, obviously she's controversial when it comes to what she's came out against, but it does connect to a lot of people. And I think that people need that. People need a leader. People need somebody that stands for something. And the Republican Party in general is missing that nationally. We don't have a lot of leaders, and that's part of the reason why I find it hard to be a Republican. It's hard to recruit to the party. It's hard to be enthusiastic because we don't have the people out front being proud of it. We're hiding in the shadows, especially in Santa Barbara, where we are afraid to put our name on a candidate because we know it'll be a loss. That's no way to win. That's no way to win an election. You can't be invisible and win an election. You have to be out there, confident. And we have so many people in town that, these are not MAGA Republicans. This isn't the Democrat. They're using national talking points against these candidates, but these aren't people that these are your neighbors and your friends and your coworkers. These are Santa Barbarans that have lived here and know your issues and work with you every day and serve you. I've served the community since 2001. I've been in public service, and I know that people know me from that. I know people respect me because I've put in a lot of my heart into this community through my employment, but it's customer service, it's public service, and I have to, I'm there for my community. And I think that is what we really need to do as conservatives and as just normal people who want to get into office who aren't pledged to a party or have party backing, because that's the real difference in Santa Barbara. If you don't have the Democratic Party, you're kind of on your own, and you got to figure out who's gonna back you and what's your path to victory.
And that's I want to talk to you about that a little bit. Like, I covered the Labor Day party big picnic at Tucker's Grove that the Democrats held, and they hold obviously a historical Labor Day event every year. It's young people, Justin. It's people in their 20s and 30s. Not everyone, but a majority of them. And these are people that the party has actively sought and worked with and organized, and they've developed them into leaders, and they're developing in North County, and it's an effort. Like, you have to work at it. And so, I mean, do the Republicans, and I know the answer to this is, but where is that leader? Where is that person? And I think you're trying to, have conversations around this and, work at that to some degree, but we know there's college conservatives. Like, we know they exist. They may be small numbers, but we know quietly there are conservatives who are out there working in your job place, in the community, and many of them are our friends. They're not MAGA people. They're not Trump people. They're just sort of conservative, traditional conservative. Like, how do conservatives get that organization going? Because right now it's sort of like attack ads and criticism of the media and, bashing of institutions, and that's not a healthy, effective policy for building political power. So what's the plan look like?
Well, I think if the Republican Party focuses on issues and outcomes, then they can gain support. Mm-hmm. If they focus on the issues that people are dealing with in California, it's economy, it's rent, it's all that stuff. There's ways that Republicans can embrace that stuff and talk to the voter. So we need to start talking to the voter as leaders. And I don't care if you're a Republican or a Democrat. I don't think either party right now is really speaking to the voters. They're not talking about the issues that people really care about. So I think just really digging in and working for the people. Where Republicans can win right now is in the youth. Our youth have been neglected for 3 years now with the COVID lockdowns. A lot of them had horrible high school experiences. Their social engagement is way down, which is the reason why most people engage in school. A lot of people go because of friendships and just something, because they want to be part of that society and that group. So that's why a lot of people motivate to be, to go to school every day, right? They need stuff that motivates them. So I think that focusing on the learning loss and the social loss that our students had really speaks to them. I've spoken to a lot of students, and Debbie Stoker's campaign is one of my favorites because it's focused on students. And I think it's one of those things where you realize once you get political that, unless you're a really good lobbyist, you're not going to get heard. Unless you're lobbying really well, you feel like you're ignored in a lot of ways. So I think the students' voices have been ignored. A majority of them are not agreeing with the mandates. So I think we win by just starting to take a stand for the people who have been neglected. We can bring the youth in, and we do need succession. And I think the Republicans have a good succession plan where they have young people working up the ranks so they're ready to go and get into office, and they know what they're doing and they're effective. So I think it's really important for the Republicans to start bringing in the youth into our activities, and the conservatives in general. And I actually have with StandUp Santa Barbara. We have, we talk to kids at UCSB all the time. We have volunteers. We have, we're working on a partnership. We have a club at City College that we're working with, that she's been, actively trying to get going. So we are working at succession, and that's what if you don't have young people in your party or your church or your city, you're dying. You're not going to grow. So you have to have that young aspect. And it's something that's really hard for the current Republican leadership to do because there's not a lot of excitement there. It's hard to recruit to the Republican Party right now. right? I mean, how do you recruit to something that's so, hidden and beat up in the corner? I see the parties as a bully and a wimp, it's like, there's, and the wimp is, lashing out with attacks and stuff, but we have to come with diplomacy in California. We don't have a lot of people in office that are on our side. So we have to come and we have to bring digestible issues to those people that are not fringe. I really like the group that brought the removing the tablets from school, Catherine Hara and that group. That was amazing. They focused on an issue that wasn't fringe, that was
tech-wise.
Part of, and they just had a really digestible issue with some solutions. And I think that's a really smart way for us to approach government as conservatives, is find a solution, package it together so that it's digestible, and give it, and then just keep presenting it. It's going to be a war of attrition, but you have to keep presenting a good solution. And then I think people will see the merit in that. We can't just come in with anger and angst and emotion. We have to have a solution. We have to have answers. We have to have a plan. And we have to stand on for something so people have a platform to stand on. We have to put that platform out. This is it. Here, come, stand on this, and then we don't have that right now. And it's just really focusing on local issues and not the national talking points. And I think that's what we'll talk to people. That's how we'll grow.
Yeah, I mean, you make a good point with the TechWise group. I don't know if they're conservative or not, and it doesn't.
I think they're a mix. They're a moderate group from what I've seen. I know some of them are probably they're a mix. They're a group of just everyday people who are typically apolitical. They don't look like there are not a lot of political activists in that group. But that's the group that's the most active right now. It's the parents. It's the people that are looking at the schools. Those people are fired up right now. I think one of the missed positions here and one of the most important races is actually Mike Stoker and Greg Hart. We haven't talked about that yet. But what I've been following and what I've been doing a lot with StandUp Santa Barbara is following the legislation coming from California. And there was 1,200 bills presented last month to California State. That's a lot of new law that most people haven't even read. Gavin hasn't signed all of them. There's a lot of laws that he's signing through right now, but most people have no idea what our legislators are doing in California. And that is why most people are leaving California. The legislation that's coming out is strangling them. And that's really radical because there's only about 7 legislators in Sacramento that do all this legislation. There's a group that does that. They're on every bill. So I really feel like that legislation is the most important part of us changing anything. So I think that Mike Stoker needs to win. I think he's rough as a politician. He's been around for a long time, so people have their views on him. But when you look at that, the importance of this position, we cannot send another rubber stamp for the Democratic Party to Sacramento. They use our Senate seat as a rubber stamp because there's no pushback in Santa Barbara. So her vote is used for all the most controversial bills. She has no say in it even. I know she doesn't agree with a lot of it, but her vote is just thrown because there's no pushback in Santa Barbara County. She's seen as a safe vote. So there's no reason for her to ever, not be on anything controversial, right? If you're thinking as a legislation, we can use this seat because she's not threatened. So I think that's really important for Santa Barbara to realize is we're putting in legislators in Sacramento that are not, they're perception politicians. They're not telling us the whole story, and they're signing bills that are affecting us dramatically. And it's down to it increases our home prices, increases our taxes all the time. I'll just give you one example of a ridiculous bill. Okay, the Republicans put together a tax decrease. It was a bill to remove the gas tax. During the inflation, they were going to try to help Californians. The Democrats gutted the bill and rewrote it into a tax and then passed it right in front of the author, with him just complaining about it the whole time. He's like, "You can't do this. This is my bill. Why are you doing this?" but they created a tax out of a bill that was supposed to remove taxes. I mean, that's how powerful the people in Sacramento are. That bill was eventually removed because it was done illegally. The way they did it was too sloppy. But that's the sort of thing that's happening up there that people aren't seeing. It's so important. It's so important for us to put legislators in that are legal minds. And Mike Stoker is a lawyer. He worked for the EPA, so he's got a environmental spin on things. So he should appeal to most voters when it comes down to what the type of legislation he will write and how he will how he's going to act in Sacramento. You know, what he's going to do for us.
Right.
So I really hope people do consider that.
Yeah.
You know, not just don't just vote blue because no matter who. We want people in office that actually have some merit and that can do the right thing.
You know, Justin, I want to talk a little bit about you because I've heard you talk at these board meetings. You're always really genuine. You're passionate. You are, you know, I've heard you get choked up and emotional when talking about masks and vaccines. And so you have a sense of like, you're not a mean person. At least, I mean, I don't know what emails school board members get, but you don't come across to me as like a mean, angry person. You come across as somebody who's frustrated and you don't feel heard, which I think a lot of conservatives feel. What's your story? Like, how did you become this person? How did you grow up?
Well, I grew up in Northern California, Placerville, near Lake Tahoe, kind of. I think one of the biggest things for me is my work ethic. I've been a really hard worker my whole life, and that came. I was raised by a single mom for most of my childhood, but it was my older brother who actually really got me a work ethic. He worked. You know, he was 17 and he ran 3 subways. So when I was 14, I was a night manager at a subway, and I worked through, went into the grocery business after that for a Safeway Bonds, and then moved down here for college in 2000. And I worked for Bonds. I was the youngest senior supervisor for Bonds in their history at that point. I was 18. I was running, I had 70 employees under me. I helped remodel the Bonds on Fairview. I opened that gas station out front. So I was a big part of that when that was going. I left Bonds during the strike, the grocery strike. I was a manager and I really cared about my people. I didn't want to cross the line. I felt like the writing was on the wall, that it was going to be worse after the strike. So I started looking for other positions. And that ended up being the end of the grocery business as a career was that strike in 2004. Now it's more of a stepping stone job for people that are getting into it. So that was kind of an era that ended, but it showed me that you always got to be ready for change. You know, you can't expect a job to stay the same forever. You can't expect an industry to stay the same forever. So I got into the car business in 2002 or 3, and I don't remember right off the top of my head, but right around that time, started working for Santa Barbara Honda, and I serviced, actually I was in sales at first. I was in sales for most of my, until 2010 at Santa Barbara Honda. Sales managed a little bit as well, which is like closing the deals and the finance side of it. And then I went into service at Honda, and that was a great blessing because that was right when right after the 2008, 2009 crash, so the economy was bad and service tends to be a better, more stable position. So I worked in a service department at Honda. And to brag a little bit, I've always been a top performer. I was the top salesman. I've always been the top service advisor. I went over and ended up managing Honda of Lompoc when they were doing their remodel, and I was managing the Lompoc service department and the Chrysler service department. So I had 2 stores that I got to learn from, and it was really a cool experience. But ended up coming back down here after a year and a half of working up there, and I stepped down into service advising again, which is just the intake of cars and dispatching and keeping people up to date on it. And that is really where I've excelled in my work profession. I was hired for Toyota Santa Barbara, and we were one of the worst in California. We were 69th out of 73. And in 4 months, we went to number one. We were number one for 2 years with basically my surveys, which were carrying our scores. I was getting 98% customer satisfaction for the whole year. So, I really brought that store's level up. So pretty cool accomplishment for me, and it really put us on the map for Toyota. So
let me go back a little bit. I mean, that's a really good success story. You talked about being raised by a single mom, and where was it, Reno, or is that what
in Placerville, near Lake Tahoe in California, right on the snow line and the foothills.
And so, can you talk a little bit about just like your childhood, high school? What impact would you say that had on you as you're sort of developing as a person?
Well, I do think that because my dad was, he had some shaky years. He had some alcoholism issue, and growing up, he was homeless. I'd see him, visit him under a bridge, and so it was, and my mom was not wealthy, so we did not have much growing up. I think that also helps me to be who I am today. But I grew up in church. I grew up a Christian. And probably why I wouldn't be accepted by the Democratic Party is I don't check any of the boxes. I'm a white Christian male. So it's just one of those things where that's me, that's my identity. I grew up with religion. I grew up with when I was 7, I read the whole Bible. I did, one of my sports was Bible quizzing. I have trophies from quizzing where I memorized 5 books of the Bible. And when I was 7 to 10 years old, and I won tournaments all over California. So that was one of my, that memorization actually is really what helped me get through school so well. I excelled through school because I had that base when I was a kid of reading a hard book and memorizing it word for word and going back and just being able to recite that. So I think that really helped me to kind of sail through school. I didn't have to put much effort into school, which backfired in a little bit because I didn't have a plan for college. But I've made a really good, I've done really well for myself without a full college degree. I have 2 years of college I did at City College, which is where I met my wife, which is a big part of my activism for City College. Yeah. I believe that their lockdown is keeping people like me from meeting their spouses and then putting the roots into the community. It's not just an education you get at City College. It's relationships you build. It's a social environment that you need to grow as a youth and a young man or young person. So I think that connection is the biggest discrimination in Santa Barbara, is the fact that Santa Barbara City College is still closed to almost over 4,000 students. And we're not allowing for them to put their family trees here and to put their roots here. Then we're losing workers, we're losing new businesses, we're losing goods and services that we would have for the future if we don't have a community college that is, bringing in the community and letting them just be themselves. Now we're keeping them off of campus. And when you do go on campus, it's a very antisocial environment. It's, regimes of masks and, go through the scanner and, do all this stuff. Instead of letting people just be kids and humans and meet their spouses and their business partners and their future, roots. That's what we really need City College to open up. And I think it's been the worst thing, for our community, that those trustees will not listen. And that's another frustration. There's people that are just not listening to the input of the community. And I don't care if they see me as a Republican, I get to put my input in. I get to, have a comment and public comment. And when there's not just me, when there's hundreds of people saying the same thing and they don't listen. Mm-hmm. And I don't see any reason why they don't listen. It's just so frustrating.
Yeah. No, and you get that sense with conservatives for sure, this feeling of they're not heard, that no one's listening, and no one's even going through the motions to pretend like they're listening to you. I want to talk to you a little bit about one thing you said, and first of all, I'm sure there's white Christian men in the Democratic Party.
No, but I wouldn't go up very far. I know Lanny Evans' team was being considered for the school board, but they said just because he's white, they're not going to put him forward. It's so weird that.
Well, I mean, I don't want to go too much in the race thing because I'm trying to keep the conversation on things we're not going to argue about.
Sure.
Just for your sake and my sake too. But it's not about like you're white, so you don't matter. It's about allowing others who've not had the opportunity to also participate, who are qualified because they've historically been disenfranchised from the system. But I don't want to get into a big debate with you on that because that's not why you're here. You're here because I want to talk to you about conservative politics, and it's just it's a bigger conversation, but I want to ask you about evangelical Christianity and politics, because I've noticed that, like with Elrod, he ran, and I've talked to Elrod, and you're a Christian, Christy Lozano, and is there sort of like a growing base of evangelicals who are trying to get into politics? Is it like a really popular church thing to talk about ways to bring God into government? I'm just sort of curious about that. Yeah.
I think a lot of conservatives are Christian. There's Democrats that are Christian too. It's definitely eye-opening when you get more into it and you start to really meet the people, because my wife is on a Christian school board, and it was actually a really hard thing to deal with, the masks and the vaccines. And, it was hard even on a board where you'd think that more people would be in a line, but she was one of the only ones that was fighting against the mandates. So as much as I came up hard against some of these board members, I know that it's a tough position, and I know that the decisions that were made were hard, and they were very, very, they were going off of their legal counsel in most cases, because that's the only way you really could be safe during the pandemic, was to ask a lawyer, and lawyers were very confused. So there was different messages coming out. So it was really hard to navigate. I think some people went a little too far there. So I do think that that's where I think we hold people to their record, and we say, this is what you did. You didn't have to. You took that choice, but you didn't have to. And I think that's where we hold ourselves and our elected officials accountable, is looking at our records and what we did, and then not making it an emotional thing, but just, this is the outcome of your decision. Either acknowledge it or you need to go. And I'm sorry I went off topic there. What was your original?
I was just sort of interested in the role that it seems like there's a little bit of unity among
I have
politics, and I'm just sort of interested if that's intended or it's just accidental, or
not really. I think it's funny. The churches are actually really scared to touch politics. Most pastors will not touch politics. So it's not coming from pulpits. It's not coming from, from the churches, but people in the churches are active. I was walking for Goleta City Council, and this is kind of an interesting story. I'll see how to frame this, but I was walking, and I met somebody who was my pastor's best friend, who left his church because they weren't woke enough. They didn't do enough for the BLM movement when it was around. So they left the church. And I was one of the ones on the other side saying, wait, we shouldn't have this much white guilt. We need to just, step back a little bit, let this play out. We shouldn't be, playing into a national political narrative in Goleta as a church. That's what I saw happening. I was pushing the other way. But I met this guy who's a Christian who believes the opposite of me in this. And that he left the church because of it. And I understand what pastors, especially pastors in Santa Barbara, are going through. Mm-hmm. They have a mixed congregation of different ideologies in Santa Barbara. There's no way to get around it. Yeah. You're not going to have all conservatives. You're not going to have all Democrats. So what do you do as a pastor? You can't speak politics unless you want to go into the culture war, unless you want to be a Rob McCoy or somebody that just full on embraces the culture war. And I think there's a place for that. I really do. But I think some of these pastors looked at it as hey, I need to serve my community and my flock. And if it takes me being required to take a vaccination just to be part of, a chaplain at a jail, I'm going to do it. If I want to be a missionary, guess what? I have to vaccinate because, that's the rules for me to be able to spread the gospel. So that's the other side of Christianity is there's a lot to it, a lot of the nuance to it. And the pastors are torn. They really have a hard position, especially in Santa Barbara, if they want to keep their congregations. And then you have, I don't know, if there's politics to it. So
yeah. Yeah. And I think a lot of people would say, well, if you're the head of a church, why would you exclude people? If some people want to be more inclusive of the perspectives that are.
Well, here's the thing. I think that Christians need to really realize, there's a lot, if I'm a Christian, but I'm not going to judge anyone. I'm not going to judge somebody that has sin. Because what if my sin is greater? If somebody else has chosen a lifestyle that I don't agree with, I'm not going to judge that person. I'm going to be nice to them. I'm going to be cordial with them. I'm going to let them live their life. I'm not going to judge their sin. Will I tell them my point of view? Sure. I'm not going to run from my own viewpoints, but I'm not going to force my viewpoints on somebody else or think that I'm better than them in any way, because, if you are believing in that, if you believe the way I believe, and you're just trying to going into the gospel to try to live like Christ, you have to, really be humble and know that God went to the right up to the center. And he, historically in the Bible, Christ was all, he was touching the lepers. He was, he was doing stuff that nobody would do that was compassionate. So I think compassion is really needed. I think my faith is a part of me. So I think it helps me to stay positive in all this stuff, because there's a lot of negatives that happen. And I think that's the bonus of having faith and having something to look forward to, rather than, just this life. So theology.
Yeah, no, that's really interesting. You said that you're sort of a Bible scholar and you won these different contests, and, that's really something that is important to you, and that's really interesting to know that.
It shaped me for who I am. It shaped me as a human, as a man, as a person. And I think, not just the biblical side of it, the regimen that I have. My Bible quizzing coach was crazy, so he put me in a room and had me memorize like crazy. But that's kind of something that I was able to get a lot out of. It improved me, and I think that's, my son is excelling. He's gotten straight A's for 4 years. I put him in a private school right after Teen Talk. That was, right when my son was was born or going into school. And that's the best investment I've ever made. He's gotten straight A pluses for 3 years. He's a year ahead in math. This is all just because we have the right focus. We're not focusing on other things, and we put him in a school, and I'm blessed to do that. It's when you look at the argument, you just white flight. No, there's all kinds of different people that are doing this. They want what's best for their kids, period. When you look at the public schools and you see the outcomes, it is not good. And there are good stories, but we really need some attention there. We need people in there that are working on outcomes and really knowing the path to it, knowing how we get to the right outcomes, not just platitudes, not just political talking points. You know, we do win on the issues right now because California is doing it wrong. We have to admit it. You can't say that our education system is productive right now.
Did you ever is your father still around? Did you ever talk to him?
Yeah, my dad has come full circle for me in my life. You know, he's amazing. You know, I love my dad. You know, I had to forgive my dad over the years, you know, a lot of things, and you know, that's what you have to do with family. But I have so much respect for who my dad is as a person and how he's grown. He's got a wonderful wife. He's got a great life. He's works hard. He's always worked hard, but he had alcoholism as a problem. That's why I don't touch alcohol. I know that my personality would probably be like him if I was an alcoholic. So I think it brings out the darkest things in people. So it was a good lesson for me, a life lesson for me to see him. Unfortunately, he had to live it, but I saw it and I reacted the opposite. You know, I decided I would not be addicted to alcohol. That's not something I ever want to identify as. So, you know, and I think that he's not touched it for years, which is a big thing, I think that's the biggest thing for him, because it brings out some dark things in people. You know, lowers your inhibitions.
Yeah. So as we sort of head toward the end here and kind of wrap up and maybe come full circle a little bit in terms of the party, what's the future? What's the outlook? I know you're trying to work with candidates. This is very important to you, and you're kind of trying to carve out a niche and an identity that's different than the Santa Barbara County Republican Central Committee. And so what are your plans and your goals here in terms of trying to build that political base?
Well, I really want to present candidates better. I think when we coming in outside of both parties, I'm coming into each campaign saying, what do you need? What's, you know, where can I ease some pressure? Because there's a lot, it sucks to be a candidate. You really feel alone. It's hard, you know, so you need pressure, you need help. Especially without the party. So if anyone is outside of the party, I've pretty much approached them and said, you know, how can I help you? And if anyone I haven't approached you, welcome to call me. But no, I essentially right now I'm a volunteer. I haven't taken any money from any campaign. I've made 9 websites. I make signs. I make flyers. I do strategy. I'm just trying to help get these campaigns going so they're more presentable, because it's you know, 4 more weeks until ballots hit, and we're behind on a lot of them. You know, I can't do everything, so I'm not the answer for conservative politics for Santa Barbara necessarily, or even for all of these races. But I know I can ease some pressure, and I know I can help them to be better at their, you know, I can bring value. I don't want to say be better. I can bring value to a lot of campaigns. But I am hopefully making it into a career over the next couple of years into 24, where we have some really big races that are coming up that I would love to be part of. And I want to make sure we're presenting well on. District 3 supervisor, the Senate race against Monique Limon. I really think we need to highlight the legislation and what is driving people away from California, businesses and everything. And you know, all the issues we're having with homelessness and energy and all that stuff, that's legislation. That's Monique Limon and Greg Hart. So if they're just rubber stamping for the progressives up there all day, we're not going to have a voice. Even the people in Santa Barbara that think that they have a voice, they're not going to have a voice. They're just going to get a vote that is thrown away because we're a safe seat. So do you want to be a vote that doesn't really matter? You know, do you really agree with everything on the Democratic Party platform? Because there's a lot on it, and there's a lot that I don't think everyone agrees with. You know,
Justin, you sound like a Republican. Why aren't you a registered Republican anymore?
I see myself as a Santa Barbaran first, and if I was going to identify with a party in California, and it would be or a politician. I don't know if you knew who this guy, but do you know Schellenberger, who ran for governor?
No.
He's an independent. He wrote San Francisco. He's an old progressive activist, but his view on California is awesome. It's so focused and so, it focuses on the issues. Homelessness, stop calling it homelessness. It's not just homelessness, it's addiction, and it's policy that's creating it. We have a lot of work to do with homelessness, with that whole issue. And he's got the best grasp on it of any politician I've seen in California. And he's not even been elected, but he's ran. He's also energy. He's a nuclear energy activist. And he was one of the big reasons why Gavin Newsom opened up Diablo Canyon. Schellenberger's pressure during his campaign was the thing that switched that over. So I would encourage people to look at his platform because it transcends party. It's all about California issues. What is hurting California? And that's how I identify. I wish the Republican Party would adopt that type of platform for California. I wish they would take a strong stance and put leaders like him up and say, this is our stance. But in California, I can't do that. They're just, it's a different political climate than everywhere. There's really only one party here, right? It's the Democrats. The Republicans are lucky if they win, right? And because it's, because of something the Democrats did wrong.
Yeah. Hey, we should probably wrap up. I appreciate your time, Justin. And I'm a big believer, and this is something I think everyone should sort of consider, is there's something to be learned from talking to people who have a different political perspective than you.
That's so important.
And
I think the prejudice is something that we need to hold back on. I think that's what the Democrats did the worst. The last thing was they called us all MAGA Republicans, but you'll find that so much diversity in those candidates. Not one of them is the same. Most of them have different stories. They have different lives, different views, different backgrounds. They don't all think the same. This is not a group of MAGA Republicans trying to take over Santa Barbara. It's the opposite of that. It's people that are just outside of the party, that align with conservative views more than Democrats right now because of the way that party has gone so far left. I'd love the Democratic Party to come back a little bit, bring back medical choice, bring back freedom of that body autonomy that they so championed years ago. That's what hurt our community so much, was removal of body autonomy and removal of informed consent. Those are words that need to be used again in the Republican Party or in the Democratic Party. So I hope that there's more balance. That's what I'd love to see is a little bit more back and forth and more discourse and less prejudice and stop accusing each other. I've learned a lot by reaching out to Democrats, and I've respected more people because I can also see the struggles they go through. So let's stop the prejudice. Let's start focusing on being Santa Barbarans first over any party. Let's focus on our neighbors and our community and how we can improve our communities for the future, how we can all help, because we all have some merit. We all have value that we can bring to this. And if we stop thinking of each other as parties, if we stop the division and the prejudice of that, once you get into those groups, that's when we'll get things done. That's when we'll have good conversations. That's when we'll come to agreements. Because I really do think about 80% of us can agree on the main issues. When it comes down to what we want as an outcome, it's going to have to be really discussed on the steps to get to that outcome. I think that's where we break down. We pass a lot of legislations with promised outcomes, but the steps are not set up for that outcome. So we have to have real legislation that's written well, real policy that's written to prove that outcome and hold the policy accountable for that outcome. Because outcomes are everything. What are we seeing on paper after we made this policy? Yeah.
All right. Justin Shores, thank you so much for your time. I appreciate it. It's been a really good conversation, and I'm looking forward to seeing you and your candidates and, this election and 2024 and everything you're going to be working on. So thanks a lot for your time.
Thank you so much, Josh.
Take care.
Thank you.